Jason. This is Two Nerds and a Joke with Robert and Ernie.
Thanks, disembodied hot girl voice. This is Two Nerds and a Joke with Robert and Ernie. I'm Ernie.
I'm Robert. And he's Jason.
And I'm Jason. I didn't know
I was waiting for something to come.
And it's Jason.
Like, maybe he'll pick up on a cue or something. That's on us. We didn't plan this properly. That's on us.
It's okay. And today's a special episode because we usually with Jason have a whole sports thing going. We take a character, we play it to the nines and do a whole sports thing. Today is a little bit different because today is a special day. And that, of course, is the day of the Mando. We have all three of us, for change, are caught up on the latest and greatest things, shockingly, and have watched the first 2 episodes of The Mandalorian. By the time this episode airs, which will be Friday, obviously, the 3rd episode will have launched, but we'll have the first 2 under our belt. So if you haven't watched the first 2, for all of our listeners, spoiler alert, we're going into the thick of things. Obviously, last season, we got to kind of give a wrap up of our thoughts and feelings on last season before we can jump into. Obviously, a lot of things going on in that season, but one of the things I know, Jason, you're a huge fan of Westerns. Mm-hmm. So this kind of hit a note with you as that Western theme, even the music. You're just waiting for that clang clang noise of the what do they call it, Ernie or Jason? The spurs. You're just waiting to spur clang in the beginning of every episode, right? That's all it is. You're waiting for the horse, you're waiting for the spurs, the whole kit and caboodle. So from the last season, we'll start there. What were some of the high points for you, Jason, as far as like what you really loved?
Sure. Yeah, man. Well, I love the fact that it's a little bit of a departure and it is much more of a Western. Star Wars is always kind of a Western where you have Han Solo, you have the white hat, the good guy, you have the black hat, the bad guy.
Sure.
So Star Wars is always kind of a Western, but Mandalorian takes that a lot further. And it's also kind of a samurai story too. And Westerns and samurai movies are always very similar. If we look at movie history, I think first there was like John Ford, the director, and John Wayne and the Searchers, and then there was those old Western movies, and then Akira Kurosawa. If I'm getting my timeline right, Akira Kurosawa saw those Westerns, really liked them. He came up with The Last Samurai. No, not The Last Samurai. Excuse me, that's Tom Cruise. He came up with Seven Samurai.
It's the modern day version.
Yeah. He came up with Seven Samurai and Rashomon and all these great.
A lot more than I do, so. It's great. You know a lot about that time history, that period of time, and that is, you talk about the spaghetti westerns, you can talk about those original samurais, you talk about those little showdown scenes, right? The fight scenes and all those old westerns, the gunslinger shots and the fight scenes of the karate and the over dramatic and this. You see both those elements in that last season, and for people, I mean, not so. Well, I'm going to put this out there on Front Street, as you would say, Ernie. But for people like me, I've watched a lot of the side Star Wars stuff. I know, Ernie, you've watched a little bit of it, right? You watched Clone Wars, and did you watch Rebels as well? Do we lose you, Ernie?
No. I'm still here.
Okay.
I've watched all that stuff. The Clone Wars, I'm caught up. Went all the way through. That was amazing how they wrapped that one up. Then there was the other one, the other Clone Wars with Genndy Tartakovsky. I hope I'm not butchering that last name. Samurai Jack style.
Right.
But what was the other thing? I did watch Rebels, and I'm trying to remember. I thought I finished it up. Could be mistaken. But the one I could not get into, and my apologies to anyone who likes this, is the Star Wars Resistance. I just didn't. Yeah. I tried, and I felt that they really, really were aiming for the TVY7 audience. Let's put it that way.
A little too soft, yeah. And again, with the first season, and again, Jason, you may not know, but there were a lot of secrets and Easter eggs from both the Rebel show and from Clone Wars, kind of linking back to those concepts. That black sword, which everyone's like, there's a black lightsaber? What's that? Nobody knew what that was. Nobody, unless you watched Rebels and know what that is. And it's basically, and correct me if I'm wrong here, but basically it's it's like the ultimate weapon of the Mandalorians. It's almost a religious weapon, which is a Mandalorian thing. So it's cool to see that, and it's cool to kind of see, and almost goes to that warlord concept they kind of came up with in some of the side stories and the legends stuff, where the end of the Empire wasn't really the end of the Empire. There were these warlords just kind of hanging out all over the place that had these, they couldn't get rid of all the ships. Okay, there were a bunch of ships just hanging out all over the place, and they were like, they went rogue. They were just like, well, we're gonna, we're gonna bully people we can find. And that's kind of what you kind of see, and it's kind of the theme there, and it's kind of a it definitely fits into a rogue nation, and these warlords are just kind of wandering around. They even use that word constantly of warlords and pirates. So even though you can kind of see how, the rebels, the resistance, they have a direction, but they aren't really in control. And you kind of see that theme continue into the second season as well, in the first couple of episodes, with a couple of the X-Wings coming back. Now, does anybody know, because those two X-Wing pilots, where have we heard of those guys before? Because they named them, right? Will Carson, I
think they might have. I saw that, now it's not like fresh in my memory, but I saw something saying maybe one of the actors did a voiceover in the cartoons, or one or two of the cartoons, and then I know another actor is like a really big fan. And then I'm not familiar with Rebels and Clone Wars and all that. I've checked out a couple episodes, but I haven't really been able to do a deep dive on that yet.
Yeah, and those are totally. And again, Rebels starts slow, but Rebels, I think, is probably the more relevant to this series in a lot of ways because of what it touches upon, I feel. So you talk about the end of the first season. You talk about now he has to get this kid back to its people.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like almost like the old movie, the Rescuers, the Mandalorian's the mouse. He's saving the boy, he's bringing him back to his family. Doesn't really understand him, doesn't really get him, completely different species. But yeah, I think that was a good place to end the first season, and we get to see his face, of course, for the first time. But we haven't seen anybody come back yet, right?
Well, the Amy Sedaris character did come back. Dressed basically as Ellen Ripley from Aliens. So we have seen her.
Yes, that's true. So one so far. So let's move into this season. Episode 1. We're coming in. What are our thoughts coming into this? And you can speak up too, Ernie.
Oh, I didn't want to interrupt you. Sorry. So, like Jason said before, there's a lot of similarities between the old Japanese mythology. There's shogun tales from feudal Japan, and John Ford and everybody had a big influence on Akira Kurosawa. Akira Kurosawa was a big influence of George Lucas, ipso facto Ron Howard, and also Bryce Dallas Howard. Sorry. She was also one of the directors of one of the episodes last in the season 1. If I'm not mistaken, it was the one where Mando goes to the planet and helps the farmer. Very similar to the wandering Ronin, right? The samurai without the shogun, without the master. And he's protecting this child. He's like, man, this child, I really care about the well-being of this kid. It's no longer about the bounty anymore. I got to find a good place and make sure he's safe. Unfortunately, he realizes that no matter where he is, there's always going to be someone looking for him. So at the end of season 1, we find out that the armorer, which we never got a name for, right? We just know that she's the armorer, right?
Yes, armorer.
Most of
Yeah.
them just have that kind of role of what they are rather than an actual name.
Well, I guess in this particular clan, right? Because
Right.
we've now realized that there are different clans of Mandalorians that are all over the place. I think they're called coverts.
Coverts, yep.
So that particular covert that he belonged, well, he didn't really belong to that covert. He kind of like inserted himself into it, right?
Sort of. I mean, I think what it ended up being is the beginning he was a part of it, and he kind of fit in because he was a Mandalorian and did follow the code. But I think when he kind of broke the process, when he left the planet and they started, shooting at him, that kind of he kind of had some issues there because again, it was all about the
Right,
process and he
because
broke the rules.
well, he broke the guild code, right? Which is about the whole like it's what's it called again? It's not called the bounty. It's called something else, right?
Right.
Well, whenever he like decided to turn back on his obligation, right? He's like, even though I got paid for this and I accepted payment, I'm gonna go against it and like save this kid, right?
Right. He's not gonna fulfill his duty, yeah.
Right, which then prompted the Mandalorian covert to basically say, well, we got to protect our own, but he's not really part of their own because he's not really Mandalorian. He's a foundling,
yes,
and he was raised.
Well, I think
So
what happens.
Oh no, go ahead with your thoughts.
Sure.
Sorry.
I think what happens is the Mandalorians are a group of lots of different species, and it's not really like one like species. It's more like a tribe, like you were saying, and then they take foundlings, like they rescue weak and innocent children, orphans, and then they raise them up in the way of their tribe or their belief system, the Mandalorians. And so I think Mando is a Mandalorian because he's been raised up in their system, but then he does get separated from them at midway through the season, the first season or so. At least that's my understanding.
Yeah, I mean there were Mandalorian people.
There's a big difference between the warriors. Like there was that really big Mandalorian warrior that basically looked down upon him, and kind of gave him a hard time. And at the end, you saw him with the jetpack, and he was kind of like, "I gotta get me one of those," right? But then you get to the end of that season, the armor's like, "Look, you gotta reunite this thing with the rest with its own kind." And he belongs to a group of enemies of men, ancient enemies. So you're talking about the quote unquote non-canonical stuff when after Return of the Jedi came out, when like you said, the warlords started popping up after the Empire fell. Because really what happened was in the first Star Wars, was it oh my gosh, Peter Cushing's character, Moff Tarkin. Tarkin said that he dissolved the Senate, and now everyone is under the control of the Empire. So every like admiral will have like his own like region of space to control.
Right.
Yeah. So it's really setting it up like you would in a Western, right? Like in the Old West, you had areas like that. You had a United States of America. You had a president. But then it's like you had all these territories that were basically run by these governors that weren't answering to the president. It was like they were the highest authorities. And they could be crooked. They could be, on the up and up or what have you. But as you can see, Moff that we ran into with the Darksaber, he looks like he wants the child to do something. Like it's his plan. And it looks like it's something about extracting the midichlorians from him, it looks like.
Not midichlorians, you mentioned that word.
And you know what? Favreau likes to dabble in all the stuff from the prequels, from the originals, from the sequels, so...
The dark arts.
Yes.
Brought it all out there. I was waiting to see Jar Jar make an appearance this season, honestly. And I wouldn't put it past them to do that.
Didn't they say that? Didn't they say that in one of the episodes? Yeah, they did. They made some snide comment about Gungans. I'm almost positive they did.
Yes, they did.
I vaguely remember. I can't put my finger on it, but
yeah, there was a mention somewhere of them saying you're not. At least you're not a Gungan.
Oh, I think Bill Burr said.
Yeah, Bill Burr. It was Bill Burr. I was gonna say it's the one where they had the gangsters. Yeah. Which is like you were saying before, Jason, this is so much like a Western, like every episode. And then it has that last little bit where you get like the story. So we have this thing where he goes into episode 1, well, episode 9, depending on who's keeping count here. I think for our sakes, so that way we can keep track of it, season 2, episode 1. Because everybody online calls it episode like 9 and episode 10. They disregard the seasons.
Well, to be fair, that's what they labeled them.
Right. So
yeah, because if you look at the titles, it's episode 9, episode 10. They're literally
10.
Seasons are there because people like seasons, but technically it's one story, and they're doing it in chapters or episodes, whatever.
So now he has to find, and he's thinking, well, the only way I can this warrior class of wizards, space wizards, right? I need to find more Mandalorians. And then he hears the rumor about a Mandalorian being on Tatooine, and I'm like, man, do they always want to play back to like that planet? You know, I'm like, what else could they possibly do to rip off the? And what they did was magical. But I want to get you guys' opinion of how it played out for you guys, and I'll give you guys my impression.
Well, that first episode too, especially the themes of it, right? Because you're a big guy on themes, Jason. The theme of that, you know, I'll do something big, and it was literally almost like classic D&D at that point. You know, I'll save your village.
Yeah. Yeah, let me make some comments about that. So I want to start by going back a little bit to something in season 1, because that leads into the first episode, or episode 9, or whatever we want to call it.
Exactly.
But we kind of briefly mentioned the Bounty Hunters Guild and their code. So one of the things that Mandalorian or Mando, does really well is, and we know he's a really high performer. If he were an athlete, he's one of the best bounty hunters. He's a very good fighter. He's very calm. We don't see a lot of impulsivity from him. He doesn't feel flustered and then make bad decisions. He's very stealthy. He can tiptoe around a spaceship and then sneak up on Bill Burr like he's Mike Myers or something like that. He's very stealthy. And part of what helps someone to be a really good high performer is value-driven behavior. And so we have a pretty good idea of what Mando's values are, because he follows the values of the Mandalorians in total. And we don't know exactly what that is. We know that weapons are a part of his religion. We know that he puts a really big emphasis on protecting the weak, protecting the young, saving children or foundlings, taking care of them. So he bases his behavior off of those values, and then he just goes full commitment, like really committed action for those values. And yeah. And another thing that's really good about the show is they do a good demonstration of the difference between values and rigid rules. So a lot of times people think that they're following a value, but they're really just, they've established a rule and they are inflexible, and the rule will go against that value. So in the Bounty Hunters Guild, those are the code. The Bounty Hunters code is much more of a rule set that he has to follow at a job, and then not really his value set. So when the rule is you don't ask questions, you just take the bounty, and then you take the money, that goes, yes, it's his code, but really it's a set of rules, and it goes against his value of protecting the innocent or protecting foundlings. Another rule that they point out is no droids. So that's Mando's rule, but then his values are what we know they are. So then sooner or later he softens on that, and he goes, okay, this droid with the voice of Taika Waititi is actually a cool person or a droid. He's protecting the child. That goes along with my values. So I'm no longer going to be anti-droid. And then we
completely anti-droid. He's still a little anti-droid. Let's not,
yeah, he's still a little uncomfortable, but he reluctantly works with droids. And then we can see that in episode 9 because we see, I think it was episode 9. He goes back to Tatooine, and Amy Sedaris's droids come out, and she's like, I know you hate droids. And then he goes, well,
yeah. It's okay.
Droids are okay.
Love her character, by the way. I mean, she is freaking awesome. I mean, that's a great character to have in this show, and she's a recurring character, which is so much fun. But she is just a good time. I mean, it's just fun to watch her.
Yeah, Amy Sedaris is awesome.
Well, the other side of that character is that she really hasn't shown us her true intentions yet, right? Like, you get little snippets of like how she does business, very disconnected from the people that require her services. But for some reason, like, the child kind of broke down a couple barriers, and she became more pleasant, as you can tell. And she almost became almost like a big sister to Mando in a way, kind of like, hey, I'm looking out for you. Watch out here, watch out there. I mean, Mando walks into the cantina, which I thought, oh my gosh, they're bringing the cantina back, so I was geeking out over that. And she's playing, looks like Sabat with a huge ant, right? Like a huge termite ant or something. And you don't know if she's like protected there, or she's a gangster, or maybe she's like a lieutenant with the Hutts or something, because I'd be surprised if you stay in canon with that. Like, the Hutts still control Tatooine, right? So why she's not in a constant state of fear is beyond me, and she's able to do her business. So I'm thinking maybe she's connected to the Hutts in a way, and maybe that's what makes her a little bit more of an interesting character to think about. But the way she set up Mando in that first one, giving him the info to seek out, Timothy Olyphant, who, mind you, excellent choice for that particular character. That was excellent. I was like, oh my gosh. And my first reaction when he said, oh, you're talking about the Marshal, why don't you ask him yourself? And he's standing there. I swore the first words out of my mouth were, it's Boba Fett. Boba Fett's the Marshal. Oh my God. I felt like that girl who was that clip of that I don't know, it came out a few years back when Rogue One came out, and it was some girl she's a devout Mormon, and part of that religion is that you have to be like a missionary for like a year or 2 years in another country, right? And she came back and she missed like Rogue One and The Force Awakens, and they were videoing her like watching Rogue One, and she's in tears and she's blubbering and she's screaming at the end. And that's how I felt at that moment with Boba Fett. I was grabbing my pillow. I was like, it's Boba Fett! But go on, you guys go, because I know I want to get you guys' reaction to that part of it.
He's a fangirling over there. But I like her character, and it's a good point, Ernie, with the gangster thing, because if she's repairing ships, right? Because that's what she's doing. She's got to. And technically speaking, Jabba's dead, and he was the Hutt on. He was choked to death, and his ship blew up.
You've got to understand. He's
there
Jabba
could be
the
other
Hutt for a
Hutts.
Reason. There were novelizations after Return of the Jedi that was just. I mean, think about it. Princess Leia's what, $1.15 in that movie, right? And Jabba's what, 3, maybe 4 tons, right, of mass. Do you really think she was strong enough to get that chain just perfect to to restrict his air? That was just my thing in that moment. I was like, he's faking it. That's what I thought as a kid, mind you. He's faking it. He's probably planning his escape, right? Because you think someone that villainous and who has evaded probably numerous assassination attempts at this point, and for Christ's sake, he's a huge slug, right? He has to be like forward thinking on these things, right? Why would he leave himself with no out, right?
Yeah.
So that's just my opinion. But go on. But Jabba the Hutt's dead, right?
In theory, but there's still probably a hut. So she's probably protected by whatever hut it is. But if the government is weakened and the hut is weakened in power, in theory, that might lead to her having kind of a everybody finds her useful status more than a protected. Like, it's that guy who in the repair shop for any mobster. They're not going to kill the guy who fixes the car.
Right.
You guys aren't going to go do that. You're not going to get your hands greasy. You need that guy. You know, he's going to keep his mouth shut. He's going to keep things running. You know, that's my
Well, unless the mechanic is asking questions around town.
Sure. Well, I'm saying, yeah. Don't go blabbing and you'll be fine.
Yeah. And I think we're also led to
Which is what she did.
like everybody in that city, Mos Eisley or whatever it's called, they all have dirty hands. They're they're all mixed in with something, whether it's just smuggling or gambling or assassinations. Everybody's in the middle of something.
Scum and villainy.
Yeah.
Yes. Absolutely. A hive of scum and villainy.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, well, that's kind of the good place of it being a connection portal, right? Everybody kind of knows something if you have the right price or whatever it is. So I think that's valuable too. Now, it's kind of interesting to me to see where that leads to. So we have to kind of go into that concept of, okay, so she's a connection point. Now what is he going to do? He's going to start looking for this character, this Mandalorian, which again, you know, it's Ernie all girly. In that classic story of, you know, the guy I'm looking for and the sheriff coming in and that whole part. I mean, that's classical, right? I mean, that's so much what it's all about. And of course, you know, the freak. And I don't know how many people, because you guys know westerns, but we were watching it. Me and my wife were watching it, and we were pretty grossed out by little baby Yoda there sitting in the spittoon.
I love that part. I love that. That was so like Jon Favreau, right? You could tell that had Jon Favreau's hands. You could be like, well, while all this dialogue's going on, what's the child doing, right? He'll be looking at a spittoon or something. Wouldn't that be hilarious? And he's like, you know, he's kind of looking at it. He kind of smells it. And then, you know, you're like, please don't hop into it. Please don't hop into it, right? Or because it's just disgusting. Like, that's why I believe we should not have a time machine. Because if you go back in time, people were gross back then, man. I mean, it would open you up to a whole new world of smells and just disgustingness, right? I mean, my daughter gets grossed out with the fact that I explained to her what a payphone was and how we all would just like lift up the receiver, put it to our ear, and she's like, "How you mean you wouldn't clean it off before you use it?" I'm like, "Well, I mean, we would take a look at it, wipe it off on our shirt or something." And she goes, "Oh, that's disgusting. Oh, how did you guys ever make it through that?" You know, but it's kind of like the same thing, right? Like you said, it's the Western thing. Like that to me looked like classic. Like if you were to look at a John Ford, Clint Eastwood. I mean, heck, even if you go to Unforgiven, right, with Clint Eastwood and Gene Hackman, right? That's, you know, the bad guy rolls into town and he comes across the local marshal who knows him, right? He's like, I know who you are. I know what your kind is like. I know you're a gunman and you're here and I'm about to protect my town from you, right? And you can tell the marshal's pretty fearless.
Mm-hmm.
And I promise you, up until the point where he took off the helmet, that's what I thought. And then I was like, oh, it's not Boba. But I mean, Timothy Oliphant was great.
Yeah, and so
breaking news, gentlemen. Alex Trebek just died.
Ooh.
Ouch.
I just got handed a note. Alex Trebek just died.
Jeez.
Oh, poor guy.
Moment of silence. My favorite show.
Yeah.
I think everybody's.
Yeah.
The mustache.
But yeah, but like going back to this happier moment, anyways. When you see that showdown, like Jason, what did you feel? Did you feel like, all right, it's starting, like this is where it's all going to happen, right? Like Mando and this guy's going to do the quick draw.
Yeah,
we saw it in episode 4 of Star Wars. You know, Han Solo and Greedo, kind of that Western feel.
Right. Yeah, and I would say I was on the edge of my seat. I'm just to start with. I recognized Boba Fett's armor right away. I was like, "Oh my god, Are they doing the big reveal like this early? Like, whoa, that's crazy." But I recognized the armor, and then we got the next reveal that it's Timothy Olyphant, and I was like, "Oh, Deadwood, yes, awesome!" So, I was fired up about that, and then because it was Timothy Olyphant, I knew he wasn't going to die just like that. So, like, what's going to happen? What's going to happen? Um, and I think it was great. And this is another really good um, demonstration of values versus rules. So if you look at the Marshal, what he's trying to do, like the spirit of what he's trying to do, is protect the community, keep them safe, make sure that they have security, they have food, there's no danger from big sand monsters or from the tribe of sand people nearby. So that's what he's trying to do, and then Mando, he's trying to, his real goal is to connect the child to the child's people, Baby Yoda to his tribe of enemy space wizards. Um, and then his secondary value is protecting the culture of Mandalorians, and then to do that, when there's armor out there that someone else is using, we need to bring it back to our people. We need to uphold our values and protect our community, blah blah blah. And then if he would have said, hand it over right now or I kill you, that's a rigid rule. And then if Timothy Oliphant or Cobb Vance, or he has some kind of strange space name.
Yeah, Cobb Vance. Yeah.
Yeah.
Cobb Vance of Vance Refrigeration.
Yeah. If he would have said, no, I'm in charge, I'm the Marshal, I keep people safe, then that's a rigid rule. But they both kind of came together and said, hey, this is what I want. I want to protect the community. What you want is this armor that belongs to your people. How about we work together and then you just walk away with the armor? And they both basically shook hands and agreed. So that I think that's a really good a really good demonstration of the difference between values and then rigidly following a set of rules.
Yeah, and it's a great piece to kind of go from there, because it leads in so many possibilities. You don't know what's going to happen at the point. Now, what I really liked at that moment, right, and this goes back to your Boba Fett thing, Ernie, was what kills a Sarlacc from a Sarlacc pit.
Right.
Well, before we move on from this, right? Before we move on to that part, right? When the genius of that whole scene, right? You have a lot of like what we were talking about before about the whole influence of like the Japanese samurai and shogun, right? Like to them in those feudal era, like you pass down your armor and your weapon in your family lineage, right?
Right.
So like Mando's looking at that, and I'm sure he's furious when he finds out that he's not a Mandalorian and he's wearing this armor. He's like, "Where'd you get this armor?" And basically, I thought he said Cad Bane, which almost freaked me out. And Jason, if anything, you got to watch the Clone Wars to find Cad Bane, because he is the guy from the Good and the Bad and the Ugly with the wide brim hat.
Oh, cool. Yeah.
No, he is
All
a
right.
very cool bounty hunter.
And Boba Fett, to my understanding, was based on Clint Eastwood's character for that series, the man with no name. You know, he always was very deliberate with his actions, very much in the shadows. He didn't move, but when he did move, it was lightning quick, right? Like he always had the blaster out, like almost instantly. That's why I knew, like, if that's Boba Fett, Mando has no chance, because Boba Fett was lightning quick in every one of those scenarios. And I knew it was his armor because I saw the dented helmet. I saw the braids, which were Wookiee braids. Those are dead Wookiees.
Nice.
And also like the mythosaur skull, and I saw like the readout. So I'm like, that's Boba Fett's armor. And when he sat down, and I know that incensed Mando, because he's like, you take that off, you either give me that armor or I'm taking it off your dead body. It kind of harkens back to like that Shogun mentality of, I know whose armor that is. That's not your armor. You don't deserve to be wearing it, right? And you can kind of tell, like, Mando's voice changed, and that's when you saw the child kind of like, uh-oh, this is serious, right? And that's when he says, "You sure you want to do this for the kid?" He goes, "He's seen worse," right? So Mando's like, he's locked and ready, right? But when he takes off the helmet, and he says, "Where did you get that armor?" And without missing a beat, how flippant, right? He says, "I just bought off some Jawas." So it kind of like you keep expecting him to have like this back scene, this whole backstory, and he's like, I just bought off some Jawas. I just thought it was cool, But to Mando, that armor is like you said, like it's his religion. That's like sacrilege, which I think was a great way of storytelling to tie in all those mythologies from feudal Japan and everything else. Not so much the Western, because in the Western, I think people back then really didn't hold much value to certain items. Maybe a rifle, you know what I mean? But like I would think it would, not the same way.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's a cool thing to see, because at that point in time, it ties in so much story across so many generations, and it's interesting because the whole Space Wizards part harkens back to the Legends or Legacy, I think, era of Star Wars, way before even the original Star Wars, even Episode 1, even before then. In Rebels, it talks about it too a lot with Mandalorians and the Great War and how that happened. They don't really talk about the timeline much there. There are other sources that talk about it, but where the planet got split in half and all this stuff, and the Jedi and Rebels cases a lot of that. Space Wizard Mandalorian didn't really get along that great, and it probably just got worse over time. And that kind of harkens to that and brings in so many cool things for them to open up and go back to. So now we're ready to go into the next part, right? We're ready. We have a goal now. Here's what we're going to do. To go back to your point, Jason.
Yeah. So then they work together. One of Mando's strengths really appears to be diplomacy. Like, you wouldn't think so, because he wears armor, you never see his face. His job is to beat people up and then just drag them somewhere. And he doesn't use a lot of diplomacy there. He just beats them up and then takes them. But when he comes across other obstacles outside of bounty hunting, or involved with bounty hunting, other than just grabbing these people, there we find that he is very open to working out a deal. He's very level-headed. He can go from fighting for his life, like with Gina Carano, or in a funny way against the Jawas, because he probably took out like a dozen of them, and he was almost dying himself. And then he can just go, you know what? How about I help you out with something, and then you just give me what I want, So he's really, really, he could be a diplomat. He's really good at saying, okay, we're enemies right now, we're going to fight, and then, you know what? Let's just keep it calm. Let's do something else. Let's talk about it. Let's work things out. And that is something that we've seen from season 1 all the way to with Timothy Olyphant, and then also in the next episode where he doesn't want to be hassled, but and help a lady, a frog lady, move her eggs, but he sees the importance. He does have that background of helping children, helping people who can't defend themselves. And then he's the reluctant hero. He reluctantly says, okay, I will put myself in danger and not go to, warp speed or light speed or whatever it is, hyperspeed, and we'll slowly get you there to protect your eggs, to protect your line, so you and your husband can have everything that you've been working for. And I'm putting myself in danger. I'm putting my ship, my livelihood, Baby Yoda, we're putting it all in danger for this higher value. And then you're going to help me too. You're going to help me find a different Mandalorian. So it's that diplomacy, it's the values, and also just being very calm. And he doesn't seem to have any fear of death. He just keeps putting himself in harm's way over and over again. So it's a strength. And then someone could also criticize that and say, hey, maybe take a few less risks, maybe maybe play it a little bit safer. So it's that double-edged sword right there.
And it's something interesting on that point too, because I was looking at that episode 10 basically, and there's a scene there when everything's gone to heck and high water, and the ship is basically destroyed, everything's ruined, all of his stuff's all over the place, and he has that moment where you almost feel like he just gave up. He's like, "Look, I'm going to go to sleep. I'm done. Everything's gone south," and I and the frog lady, being a genius obviously of some sort, was able to get the communicator and said, you need to follow your rules, you need to get back to what you're supposed to do, you're a Mandalorian, for goodness sake. And it was really kind of weird. It was like the first time in any of the episodes that I've really seen the Mandalorian have a crisis of ego, of confidence in himself. And it was kind of weird to kind of see that moment there that you really hadn't seen before in anything else. So I thought that was kind of an interesting transition and reminder that he's just a guy.
Right.
For all his awesome, he's just a guy. And even the coolest guy, the most bravest guy, at some point is just going to say, I'm kind of done.
Right.
Well, what I noticed, and this is what I thought season 1. I mean, we didn't get to the Crate Dragon yet, which I thought was a great pull from
Monster of the Week.
The very first Star Wars, when C-3PO separates himself from R2D, him walking, and you see on the dune this long row of stones. And you realize, oh, those aren't stones. That's the vertebrae of some long. Right. Whether that's the same one or not, we're not sure, right? But what I noticed is that a lot of near misses and a lot of setups. So when they team up and they decide that they're going to take this thing on, they're going to join this village with a known enemy, which is very similar to the Westerns, when you would have these frontier towns and the group of local indigenous people, Indians, they've had long running feuds with one another, somehow joins forces against a common enemy. And so they join forces against this common enemy, and you realize, well, it's just a really big worm with sharp teeth, right? How dangerous could it be? Until it started spitting acid, right? And it started melting people. Then you're like, okay, this is a new thing. And how selfless Mando was, he kind of set up his friend to get away. And he realized that, this guy really is honest at heart, right? It's not about the armor anymore. It's about the person underneath the armor, right? And he's an honorable person, and he was willing to die for his town people, right? The armor was just a way for him to help protect it. He wasn't doing it to be disrespectful or anything. However, what I noticed is that the battle damage on the rocket was repaired from before, and I think Mando noticed that, and that's why he hit it in that same spot. It's the spot where Han Solo hit Boba Fett in Return of the Jedi. That's what
he went all crazy. Yeah.
Yeah. So you could see it was repaired there. The rocket was, and I guess Mando knew if I hit it there, it would set it off, right? And he'd be in an uncontrolled flight. However, when he went into the Crate Dragon, and you saw that he blew it from the inside out, that the acid ran off of the steel, off of the armor, which kind of set up of the whole premise. I've always believed this, that when Boba Fett fell into the Sarlacc pit, that the acid that was in there wasn't going to eat him because of the armor, and he climbed his way out.
Right.
And that's when you saw the end of that episode, and it kind of made me feel sad, because it's like, yes, there was a Mandalorian there, you just missed him, right? So it's kind of like one of those Western things, or like if you go back to those old Shogun movies where the wandering Ronin, is trying to find the rest of his brother samurai, and he keeps missing them, right? And it's kind of like, oh man, if he had just stayed a little while longer. But I could tell Mando's heart's really heavy at the end of that episode, because he's like, yeah, people think it's Mandalorian because the armor doesn't make him a Mandalorian, right? So you go into episode 2 and you kind of see he's like, I'm defeated. I have no idea what to do. Right. In the last season, he found out that entire culvert got wasted, and the armor has all those helmets just in a big pile. And he's like, am I the cause of all this? Did I just kill a whole bunch of my own people? for my own personal gain. And I know it's feeling real heavy on that episode. And like you said, he's kind of like, I really don't want to put myself at risk again, right?
Mm-hmm.
I just want to get this kid like to his people. But when the frog lady, I don't think we ever got a name for her either, which is unfortunate. She's carrying around the unfertilized eggs, which a lot of people, I had to remind a lot of people online that, the child wasn't eating fertilized eggs.
It's still gross. I don't care.
It's like eating chicken eggs. It's like when you go into your fridge, you get some chicken eggs. No, it's the same thing.
What he's doing is he's eating caviar. That's what he's doing.
Caviar.
It's caviar. It's fish eggs. It's roe. Okay,
all
that's
right,
what he's eating.
I give you that. I'll give
gross.
you that. Point to you. I don't mind caviar. I would never go out of my way for caviar. I don't mind it, right? But but like you could tell like the progression of Mando from the first season, like whoever's doing the writing of this did a wonderful job. You can kind of see like the old stuff being chipped away and a lot more of like the person under the armor, right? So going into this one, I thought, like you said, like at that point he had given up. He was just like, screw it. You know what? Sweet cold death, I embrace you now. And that's when Frog Lady kind of like hooks up to what was he? I forgot his name. Zero was his name.
Mm-hmm.
She hooks up Zero and manages to do the translator. And Zero basically translates like everything that she's saying. Like you said, hey, I thought, the legends of the Mandalorians said that you are fearless and, you're ferocious, tenacious. You don't ever give up. Have you forgotten your code?
Right.
And you can kind of see like his helmet. I don't just give up.
Yeah, it's kind of one of the things I'm always fascinated by. It's like the off-screen moments in between. Like, okay, when's the last time this guy ate?
Right.
He's got to take his helmet off to eat. When is he doing that? Does he sleep in full armor, even though it's just the kid there, and the kid's already seen his face? How dedicated is like? That's what I'm always curious about with that.
Whoa! Did the child see his face? Or was it just IG-11 that saw his face?
No. Because when he was injured in that battle scene, they took his helmet off to help heal him. Yeah, it wasn't the kid that saw him. Who saw him?
That was that droid.
Just the droid. That was it, right?
Yes.
Yeah, because it was the law.
Right.
But in the episode with in the planet with Gina Carano, they do show him take it off. And then he's like looking and watching people play. I don't know what the exact rule is. I think it might be you can take it off around your tribe, but you can't take it off outside. I'm assuming because for him to get new armor and a new helmet, he has to take it off, and then the person has to give it to him. So, yeah.
It's one of those things. It's just kind of curious, right?
Yeah. But
it's like in video games. When did the characters go to the bathroom? You never see that happen.
Right. Well, Mario jumps into a big pipe, so it might be like during that time because the pipes are all connected anyway. So.
Well, I'm thinking about it like even like Assassin's Creed. I mean, you're wandering around for a long time. You never sit down and eat and drink and go to the bathroom ever. I mean, you sleep with people, but you can't. You never see. It's like I'm getting hungry. Let's go get some food. I mean, you never see that.
This reminds me so much. You remind me so much, Robert, of this conversation I had with this pilot when I was in high school. He flew the SR-71, which was a spy plane that flew at great altitudes. These guys were dressed as they had to wear pressure suits and everything else. And when he would go out and he would give like talks about like what it was like, flying 5 times faster than the speed of sound, flying so high you can see the curvature of the earth, and all these other things, like all these other accomplishments that he could talk about. And the first question when you open up Q&A is, how do you go to the bathroom? He always found that amazing. That's where everyone's mind goes, right?
Yeah.
So like you said, he does take the helmet off to eat because in that episode, he does explain. She asked him, "Can you ever take your helmet off?" And he says, "If I take it off, I can never put it back on again." And he says, I could take it off to eat, I could take it off to sleep, as long as no one else sees me. And then he puts it back on, right?
Right.
But she never sees him with the helmet off. I think IG-11 was the only thing that saw him without his helmet, because when he picked him up and kind of like helped him walk along after he got wounded, he put the helmet back on him.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Interesting.
Yeah.
It's just one of those curiosities, right?
Right.
Yeah, I personally think that I don't know. I guess it's kind of like that whole thing of back to that, that armor thing, right? Like you don't take it off unless like you're dead, that type of thing. And that's what the armorer did, as you can tell. Like you saw all those helmets. There had to have been at least 20 helmets there, right? Of fallen Mandos that she was just going to boil down back into, bars of Beskar to use for other things, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, but the other part about too, for me, that were frightening was that freaking creature. Because I have a huge fear of spiders. And I think we're way too close to being a spider, right? Yeah. And as we know, because for whatever reason, the child thinks with his stomach, right?
Gotta love that.
He was there.
You feed the kid, right? You feed him.
Yeah, he's getting fed, I'm sure. But he's like slurping up these things, and like he's like, no more. And he kind of like dares him, and he like pulls up his hand. He's only when he goes like just to do that, just to upset him, right? It's such a kid move to do, right? Like put that down, and you see him like, aha, I got another one in on you.
Yeah, I want to.
So that part to me was great, but then like when he was digging around in the, like you said, going back to Aliens, like the egg room in Aliens, right? And I'm like, oh, those are pods. Those things are gonna curl open, and those little face huggers are gonna come out, right?
Mm-hmm.
No, Baby Yoda decides, I'm gonna just skip that part. I'm gonna tear it open. I'm gonna stick my hand into the green goop, pull it out, and just like rip into one, right? Whatever's at the bottom of that. So gross.
I know.
Gross.
I want to comment on the egg eating. So one of the things that Mandalorian does really well is, instead of having just completely white hat and black hat characters where someone's completely good and someone's completely bad, they take someone like Baby Yoda, just adorable. You love him, even if you aren't really like a kid person, you still like, oh wow, look at that, I like that, That's cool. And then they take that character that you love, you want to make sure he's safe, all that stuff, and then you have him do these terrible things. so it's unfertilized, but we just heard a story about how hard this lady has worked, how she's trying to make a life for herself. This is the end of her line. She needs to get these eggs across space to a different planet so her husband can fertilize them, or else it's the end of their line. And then after that, you hear cute music, and you see Baby Yoda. Whoa, wow, cool. What is that? And the one unfertilized.
That is the counter. That is the countenance of gray right there. It's like, what side are you on, dude? It's food. There's no side.
Remember,
there's only food.
Before that scene, before the boop, he's like looking at the glass, and he has that look on his face. And when he puts his hand on the glass, all the eggs seem to flow to it. I'm like, oh my gosh, he's gonna do some force junk on it, and like they're gonna grow into tadpoles or something, right? No, the kid was just like, oh my gosh, look at all this good food, right? That's what it turned into. I can eat all of this and be full. Like, this is magical, right? So that was the part to me that kind of turned me, kind of like switched it. I was like, oh my God, Jon Favreau has a twisted sense of humor on this one. So twisted. Because like he had me because like the kid was like pressed up against the glass and all the things start floating to it.
Right.
But also that the Shades of Grey part is interesting because like when Mando and Cara Dune were arm wrestling to spend blow some time while they were waiting to get to where they were, they started arm wrestling and Mando and Baby Yoda did the Force choke on her, and he was ready to end her right there, and he had to he was like, "Oh my gosh, no," And Baby Yoda had that look on his face, right? Like he's like, "Yeah, I'm gonna get you now. You done? Yeah. These hands are rated E for everyone." That's what he did.
Well, and that goes to the point of kind of what we kind of learned over time with the Force itself. It's just a thing. It's how the user uses it that determines whether they're good or evil. The Force itself isn't good or evil. It's just a tool. And Yoda is just at that stage, or Baby Yoda, sorry, not really Yoda, but Baby Yoda's at that stage where I'm going to use it for whatever I can to do whatever I want. Which is going to be interesting to see what they end up doing with him as far as the finding Jedi, because in theory all the Jedi are dead, obviously, except for a few that we know are out there. Except for the few we know.
The one.
And we know there's one out there. But back to your
name. Do I say the name?
Well, it's not really a spoiler. Okay, it is a spoiler for anybody who hasn't watched Rebels. We'll put it that way. If you watched Rebels,
or the Clone Wars,
true. So I mean, a lot of you may know the name too, Jason. But yeah, go ahead and say it, and we can just let people know that we know awesome things.
I'll get really close, right? I'll get really close here. Hold on. Which sounds kind of Japanese when you think about it. So once again, that little twist to like the old stories, right? Ahsoka Tano, man, she is planned in the season, and Rosario Dawson's playing her.
Mm-hmm.
Have all the monies here. Have all the monies. Have all the toys, all the money, everything done.
Yeah, and it's going to be a lot of fun to see her come in, and she hasn't come in yet, but we know she's coming. We know she's going to be. I'm expecting her to be the Jedi he finds, right? Because she's pretty much all that's left. And it's fascinating to me how they never she's there in the background. I mean, we never hear in any of the movies that Anakin has a Padawan. Ever. It's never mentioned. But they weave it in such a way that why would he? They're no longer friends. He's turned to the dark side. She's abandoned him.
Remember, I mean, because Anakin Skywalker was a Jedi Master. You can only be a Master if you have an apprentice, right?
Right, which they never explained because they never brought her up. But then they bring her up, and you're like, which is a great thing that the show does too. Is they really bring the ending. With that out right there, you have no idea how he got there. He's there for 2 seconds scene, and you're like, how the heck did he get there? Okay, we know he survived. He's alive. Now what? You're never going to show him again? Is that all we get? One silhouette and you're done?
Well, that silhouette was very telling because if you notice what was on his back, he had a bantha stick, right? So he must have a relationship with the Tusken Raiders, right?
Right.
And then he also had a long rifle, which means that they probably took him in. And the Jawas never really explained how they got that armor to, what's his name? Gosh, I can't believe Cad. No, not Cad. I forgot his name. Timothy's character's name. I'm sorry. He's such a good character. I really should commit his name to memory.
You should do that. Work on that.
He gave so much to this season in his dialogue and his actions that you kind of could tell where the season is going to go, because I don't think it's going to be the last we see of him. And just seeing in the silhouette, you can kind of tell that maybe Boba walked away from bounty hunting altogether, right? So maybe he had a change of heart as well, because Boba Fett was the most dangerous bounty hunter in the galaxy, and that was said in the movies. So that's canon right there. And for Darth Vader to give him specific instructions, no disintegrations, it led to the theory of, did he disintegrate like Luke's aunt and uncle back on Tatooine? That was the whole thing. So that for him to make his appearance in this show and to see Mando just barely miss him, right? Like like it's like those old Western shows where it's like, as the guy's leaving, he goes by like this rusted old cabin on the hill, and you see the cabin door open, and it's the guy he was looking for, right?
Right.
So it's kind of like one of those things where you kind of see how the season's going, and then you see him hit rock bottom with those spider things, right? Like that was an impossible thing. Had the X-wing pilots not taken into account of his good deeds, right? That would have ended much more different. Much more different.
Right. And then that also goes back to values versus rules again with the X-wing fighters. And then one thing that I wanted to touch on real quick, my understanding is that Boba Fett wasn't actually a Mandalorian. He just wore Mandalorian armor. So my expectation is that when Mando finally meets him, it's not going to be the way that he was hoping it would happen. It's probably going to be hostile. There's, it's going to turn out that Boba's not going to help him. He's going to be a villain. And if my understanding is right, then, I'm not sure exactly what the implications are as far as Boba not really being a Mandalorian. But so we'll see how that plays out.
Yeah, because it's an interesting fact, because they talk about that in, like episode 1, 2, or 3, like one of the first 3 episodes. It's like, you can be from Mandaloria. So the planet Mandalorian is a real place. Yeah. But to be the Mandalorian religion versus being a Mandalorian race are 2 very different things. And I believe that you're right in that Boba Fett may have been a Mandalorian, but he's not a religious Mandalorian, if you will. More of the pure bounty hunter, again, because we know this from his backstory, and they tie in episode 1 all over the place, where he's the kid of he's basically a clone. So he's a clone of his father. Well, no, sorry, he's the son of his father. He's not a clone, but that he's part of this whole clone army.
Whoa. I have to correct you. You on that one.
Okay, fine, go ahead.
In episode 2, Attack of the Clones, which everyone arguably agrees that's the weakest of all the Star Wars movies. However, if you watch it and you pick out some of the things, one of the things they talk about is the introduction of Jango Fett and this clone army, right? So Jango Fett was a bounty hunter, and he was his services were paid for by a Jedi named Sifo Dyas. Sifo Dyas had long passed away, but somehow convinced this planet of people of this race of aliens that clone life to use him as basically like patient zero to create an entire clone army. And his only request for payment was an unaltered clone that he could raise as his son. Now, you never heard if Jango was Mandalorian or whatever. They only said he was a bounty hunter.
Okay.
Right? And he wore the Mandalorian armor, so it was safe to assume. But however, he was always taking his helmet off. He walked around most of that movie without a helmet. It wasn't until he got into a fight with Obi-Wan that he put the helmet on. And then he met his end.
Well, but yeah, I mean,
Mace
that's what
yeah, Mace Windu
right, and
lopped
then
off his head. And then you saw Boba like kind of kissing the helmet, and that's when people started putting 2 and 2 together. Like, wait a minute, Boba took his dad's armor and painted it green because everyone associated Jango, which at the time was like the greatest bounty hunter in the galaxy. He repainted it green and yellow and red and all these other colors, as opposed to the original silver and blue.
Yeah, well, you can assume at that point that his son, clone son, wasn't raised in the Mandalorian way at all. Like, no religion, none of that piece of it. So that definitely is part of it that you got to consider there as a piece, of the. Yeah.
That's what I was thinking also, that there's always been these subreddits that I come across about like some of the stuff. There were some books that were labeled as non-canon that were written about Boba Fett, climbing out of the Sarlacc pit in Tatooine, and then like basically turning his back on the Mandalorian oath and everything else, and becoming like what you saw there is like amongst the people of Tatooine, right? He just wanted to live his life and die because he realized the error of his ways. And then there's the other part of it is that he did what he had to do to survive, and what he had to do to survive was like give up his armor. He gave up his armor, which means he can never wear it again. So there's that part of maybe he was trained by Mandalorians after Jango Fett passed away.
Yeah, it's hard. It's hard to tell. We don't know. We don't know.
But I have a feeling this will probably cement the whole Boba Fett like legacy, because that's what it seems like everybody wanted with the standalone movies, anyways. When they came out and Disney said, "Hey, we purchased Star Wars. We're curious to hear about what stories you want us to tell. We want to hear your ideas." And everyone, of course, jokingly said Darth Vader, but everyone was like, "That's 4, 5, and 6." Right? And then 1, 2, and 3. That's all Darth Vader. And then the next one was, well, we want to see Boba. They're like, great. Here's Han Solo. So we were like, what the heck? So now we realize that this is probably a better way to tell that story. And I can't wait for all these other things to kind of tie in. The whole story, though, like you were saying before, Jason, the whole shades of gray and everything, I think that's going to play a lot into probably this next episode, because you got to believe that he makes it to that planet, right? Wherever he's trying to get to. So wondering if he's going to do the right thing. And we're wondering if there's another Mandalorian on this other planet. It's definitely not Boba Fett, because they left Tatooine. Right. So who else could it have been? And I can only think of the group of Mandalorians from the Clone Wars. I forgot what they were called. You remember, Robert?
Oh, the young kids, right? Who formed the rebellion?
No, it was the prince. It was the queen's sister.
Right.
Remember
yeah.
that group that they belonged to?
Yeah.
It wasn't the Red Dawn or anything like that. It was called.
No. Red Dawn was the gangster group. I don't remember what they're called, but they were basically young rebels against the Mando way. But they were Mandalorians. Yeah. I don't remember what they were called either. But yeah, I remember the group with
I think
blue-haired chick.
Maybe Sabine. With Sabine and all of them.
Yeah.
It
could be Sabine.
It could be that.
It could be. We'll see. Maybe.
See, Jason, that's why you need to watch the last 4 episodes of the Clone Wars, because that could be a movie. That was all done by Dave Filoni before the Mandalorian series started. He wrote out the last 4 episodes of the Clone Wars, and essentially you could draw straight parallels to the Mandalorian. The last scene itself speaks volumes of what this is going to be like. And I like Timothy's character, how he mentioned back, like, it all happened when the Death Star exploded, the second one. So I'm wondering, why did he put such emphasis on saying the second one, right? You got to wonder about that. Like, what is this world like now with the New Republic and everything else? Like, is that how they age themselves? It's kind of like saying World War I and World War II. Is it kind of like that, you think?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it could be, because something weird about the Star Wars universe is they don't seem to have email. They don't seem to have a central source of news where they just stay up to date. Because Darth Vader was Anakin Skywalker, and then here's the Skywalker kid, and they're completely thrown off by there being a relationship. So really, this should have just been stuff that was in the newspaper. But something that they do understand is there was one Death Star and there was another one. So that appears to be like a really important time marker for them, timestamp. Yeah.
Well, and to be fair too, all of the shows really, I mean, for the most part, these shows and the movies to a large extent are out on these backwater planets that probably aren't connected. Like, none of them are in the central core, because they always talk about the central core planets. That's what Kylo Ren blew up in the last series of movies. He blew up those central planets. Those guys probably knew pretty much everything, except
he blew up the New Republic. Yeah,
you're right. But again, in that case, it was probably a lot of propaganda. Like, the news was there, but who controlled the news?
Right. Mm-hmm.
So lots of misinformation going around. So lots of misinformation.
Also, you kind of think of it. Also, he said when the second Death Star exploded, that's when all these guilds kind of like started taking over. And he said that there was the battle above Mos Eisley. So that got my head thinking, maybe Boba was involved in that. You know what I mean?
Mm.
He used to have a ship. It was called Slave One,
Yes.
and we haven't seen it anywhere. So maybe it could be one of those tie-ins where like we go back to Tatooine, and it's inevitable, right? Like
sure.
Boba Fett hasn't forgotten to be the best bounty hunter in the galaxy. Like that doesn't ever fade. It's kind of like the old Shogun who was like the great master, the great sword master. He doesn't forget how to use a sword just because he stopped, right? So I'm thinking it's probably going to end up being like one of those moments of like Last Samurai thing where he imparts like some final wisdom on Mando. That's just me, just kind of projecting out, because the people that he's surrounding himself with, when you think about it, even the old Bounty Hunter Guild boss is more like a friend now than an employer, right? And Cara Dune, she's no longer a shock trooper. She's more like, the guardian angel, so to speak. Like she's willing to like go into battle with him.
Right.
So the only thing and the thing I remember in this last episode is that they mentioned the people that he brought to justice. Mm-hmm. Weren't those the names of the guys that he sold out in that other episode, that same episode where they were?
Yeah, the one where the X-Wing fighters came into that ship.
Bill Burr's episode.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so that episode changed a lot for Mando and made him a good guy-ish, sort of
kind. A gray character, like Jason would say. He's neither good nor bad. He's kind of like he has to do horrible things to do a good thing. In other words.
Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah, and I'm feeling like Boba is going to be maybe a big bad or a villain or something. They're just kind of keeping him in the background, and then it seemed like that shot of him was kind of almost like a warning, like it seemed
a little ominous.
Yeah, a little ominous. So, but we'll see, because it was very ambiguous. So he could just be like a guiding figure. And then I am hoping to have a team up at the end. Like they already did it, but at the very least, I would like to see Timothy Olyphant again. But since I guess they already did the team up last season, I don't know if they'll do it again. But I would enjoy it.
Yeah, unless this is like every Star Wars season 2, and all hope is lost in the second season.
Well, we also got to remember there's the Moff out there with the dark saber, right? He's out there. Yeah, he's looking for him. He's really the big bad, right? I thought it was the Swedish filmmaker who I thought he should have gotten an Academy Award for his performance. I thought he was so believable. Like he should have won all the awards, right?
Yeah.
But like I thought he was the big bad. But then I found out, it's Moff Gideon, right? Mm-hmm. Moff Gideon.
Perfect guy to play him, too. I mean, that guy's been a villain in so many things.
Yeah.
He plays a great villain.
What was the other thing that he was the villain in? Mm-hmm. I forgot the other show, but that's irrelevant. But yeah, he plays it so straight. And you can tell, like, yeah, this is the bad guy. Like, he's willing to, like, his troops. And that's what the stormtroopers even said. Like, remember the last time, like, somebody tried to interrupt him or give him bad news? Like, they ended up wiping him. Like, I'm not giving him any news.
Oh, man. Well, this could go on for hours, and it's already gone on for hours. It's so much and so deep. We're obviously going to have to do this again when more episodes come out. Definitely want people to follow us, like us, love us on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and all the rest. Jason, of course, always a pleasure having you come and talk to us about anything, really. It's always a good time. We will leave you with the last word. What are your closing thoughts, and what else do you hope to see in the next episodes?
Okay.
Yes.
The closing thoughts. I look forward to, and then I'll probably say her name wrong right now, but Ahsoka Tano.
Got
I'm
it.
really looking forward to that. I have tried to watch a few of her episodes in the cartoons. I haven't been able to like really get to know that character yet, but I know she's beloved. I know Rosario Dawson loves that character, so then that's also um, uh, gives me more to look forward to because I know she'll take it very seriously. She'll do a very good portrayal. And then I wouldn't be able to tell the difference anyway. But I think she'll do a good job, and then I'll appreciate that. So I'm looking forward to that. Man, I'm curious to see if Baby Yoda will age slightly. He ages so slowly. The show could go on for 10 years and he might never age. But I am curious to see, like, does he start saying words? Does he ever pilot a ship? Does he what does he ever, like, what developmental stages does he start to progress on? And then if Bill Burr came back, I would love that. If Gina Carano came back, or what's his name? Carl Weathers. If we had all those characters back, you got yourself a stew. If you know Carl Weathers from Arrested Development. So I would love all that stuff, and it's just been a really good quality show where they do a good job of portraying the psychology of characters. They don't, at least so far, they haven't rushed to like give you more and more and more. It's very contained storytelling, which I like. Just tell me one story with a cast of characters that you like and you get to know, and they take their time doing it. So I'm looking forward to all of that and just the good storytelling.
And of course, Jason, as you always say.
As I always say, insert tagline here.
And Ernie, with every episode, you have to have a good line. And we know that Mando had a few, so we have to have one of our own.
Peace out.
Peace out, everybody.
Peace
we
out.
all have spoken.
And that's another episode of Two Nerds and a Joke. Follow Robert and Ernie on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, and subscribe to their YouTube channel.